So today we're going to be creating abstract designs with micro-displacement. And this is a very cool technique, and we will not be using any external add-ons. This will all be done procedurally within Blender, within the node editor. And I will have these files available on my Patreon after, so if you're subscribed to my Patreon, you will get these files and it will all be set up. So yeah, let's begin. So first what we're going to do is we're going to delete the default cube, and I'm going to add in a plane, and I could scale it up a little bit, so I'm going to do S4 on my keyboard, and then I'm going to apply the scale. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, since we're using micro displacement, we need to go to this icon here and then click on cycles and set this to experimental. Now, before I do anything, you're going to want to use GPU rendering because CPU is slower. And we are going to set up a subdivision surface and make sure that this is on simple or it will distort your geometry. And we're going to use adaptive subdivision, and we are going to then see where it says dicing scale. You want to make sure that's 1 to get the highest quality. And then if we scroll down, you will see that the viewport is 8. Now, on my computer, since it can handle this, I'm going to change this to 1 so that I see the preview as it will look in the render. Now, if your machine is slower, it may not be able to handle this, so you may have to turn this setting up. So keep that in mind. Now, if I render now, nothing happens. So we have to apply a material. So I'm going to click on this icon here, and I'm going to make a new material, and I will make sure that's principled, and everything else here is good except one setting. And you see where this says displacement. If we just have this set to bump, it will not actually displace the geometry. And that's a problem because you will only get fake displacement, like it's not going to actually move the mesh. So you have to set this to displacement, and I'm going to set it to displacement only. So make sure that you set this. If you don't set this, it will not work. So that's a very important setting. Alrighty, so now it's time for the shading. So I'm going to make a new window, and I'm going to go to shader editor. And you see we got the nice principled setup, but we are going to create a procedural material. Okay, so before I do anything, let's go and make sure in the add-ons panel that you have Node Wrangler enabled. In my case, it's checked. That will speed up your workflow. So I'm going to just click on the principled and press Ctrl-T. And I automatically get the texture coordinate setup, which is very helpful for setting up any other nodes. Now I'm going to add a Voronoi texture. And I'm going to set the scale to 10. And I will duplicate this, connect it to here. This one, same thing, scale of 10. Now I will add 2 color ramps and duplicate this one, set it to the distance, connect it there, and I will set this one to constant, bring it to right about there. For the top one, I will set this to linear, which it is on already, and I will just bring these two right about here, maybe a little bit to the left. Okay, so now I will add another node, and that's going to be a math node, and this one will be subtract. And I will add another color ramp, connect it to the Voronoi, and make sure it's on the distance. And then we will set that to subtract again. So I'm going to just explain briefly what's going on here. So actually, let me set up the whole material, and then I'll try to make it clear and better explain what's going on. So I'm going to add a mix shader. Connect this to the top. This one will be, I have to add a displacement also. And this will be connected to the top of that. And the output will be going to here. Now, this mix shader we are going to want to connect to the surface. So don't connect the principal to the surface. We will be connecting this mix shader to the surface. And what I'm going to do next is just take the principal, apply it to the top input, and I'm going to add an emission shader and add that to the bottom. I'm going to set the strength to 10. I'm going to add another color ramp. And I will set the one on the right all the way to green. The one on the left will be set all the way to blue. I'm going to connect that to the emission shader. And let me actually bring that to the top and this one to the bottom to make things a little bit easier to understand. I'm going to add a map range node. I will set that to between 0 and 10, and this between 0 and 1. Connect this to here, and then I'm going to add a separate XYZ. And combine XYZ. And I'm only going to use the X direction because basically what I'm doing is I'm taking a texture, right, and I'm trying to find the distance between these 2 points, and I'm going to map that between blue to green, and that's going to create our gradient. You will see how this works very shortly. So this combine, I believe that I have to, actually nope, I don't want to combine. Just need a math node again, and I'm going to set that to subtract. And I'm going to add that to the top, and then finally bring that into the map range, and just add one more, which is geometry. And we still need to get the position, so I'm going to plug that in. And I believe this is our setup. So let's see if this works. Okay. So there has to be a setting that has to be changed, and in my case I forgot to set this one to Manhattan and set that to F2, and then I have to set this one to Chevy, I don't know how you pronounce that, and that's going to be F2. And this micro displacement is a little bit on the strong side, so I'm going to bring that down to like 0.1. And now the color needs to be changed to maybe black, and yeah. Now there is more stuff you could change, like you could change the scale and get something more like that. You can bring the scale of this one up, and keep in mind what we got going on here is that this one this one can be actually brought down or up. And then what we're doing is we're subtracting this design from that. And that gives us very intricate patterns. And then we push that into the height map. And that's really how this works. And then this one, we're getting our position across the x vector, which is this direction. Left is going to be mapped to more blue, and right is going to be mapped to more green. And the map range just expands that range and maps it correctly, and that's how that works. Now, I believe this object didn't have the transform applied, or it's scaled differently than in my other example, so I believe I have to change this to 40. And that looks more similar. Let me actually rotate this. Yeah, that looks pretty similar to the intro. After that, I did some compositing. Not going to cover that on this video, but on my Patreon, I do have the compositing setup added in the file. Yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, and I will put my Patreon link in the description. Thank you guys. I hope this helped.